Welcome to the Planning for Life podcast with certified financial planner professional Russell Jacobs and financial life advisor Carl Coolidge. Carl and Russell will share creative strategies and ideas for overcoming challenges in your personal and financial life. Inevitably, life happens, and we will empower you to reach your destination. Thanks for joining us. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to another podcast with Carl Coolidge. Now, the last podcast that we recorded with Carl's partner, Russell Jacobs, we talked a lot about some of the big financial myths that happen really across a person's lifetime. And I wanted to continue this trend today with Carl to talk a little bit about some of the bad financial habits that people fall into. So this is a very good companion podcast to the one that Russell did. So, Carl, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here as always.
Well, there are a lot of bad financial habits, and I'm probably touching on about 10 of them today, but I'm going to read you maybe like a category, and then you just take that wherever you want. And the first one is the idea of needs versus wants. Let's go.
Oh, well, you started with the big one, Matt. Needs versus wants is certainly a conversation we have quite a bit with clients. And to me, it goes a couple of ways. One is most of our clients are people who have worked very, very hard to get their education, their degrees. A lot of those have advanced degrees. And they really, at that point, have lived on a very small amount of money, relatively speaking. And so at that point, a lot of times what they're trying to accomplish is they want to reap the benefits of all this time, effort, energy, money they put into their education. And now they're in a profession where they're going to make good money. It may not happen immediately, but it's going to happen over the long term. And so they want to be rewarded for that time. And I don't blame them at all. I totally understand that. And so what happens is, going back to your original question, that's where the needs and wants come in that some of these may not really be needs at that point, but there's certainly a lot of wants. And I feel our role, Russell and I as advisors in the practice are trying to find that balance between those needs and wants, but also letting them reap the benefits of what they've accomplished over these years and all the hard work they put in. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times with planning, the way I'll look at it is to say, okay, if you do these, 5, 7, 10 things that you need to be doing, then sure, you can go do the other the other wants that you have, because I know you're doing the core things that you need to be doing in order to be successful and in order to be on track. So, needs and wants are always a tough conversation. And a lot of people can be very, very persuasive in making a want into a need.
Well, the next one is entirely along those lines, which is so I'm going to challenge you on this, and obviously with as much grace and politeness as I can. But, those people who have advanced degrees, those people who have been very successful, one of the things that happens is they get sucked into this keeping up with the Joneses sort of philosophy, which is, yes, part of the needs and wants, but is at a different psychological level. So how do you attack that bad financial habit?
You're right. It's a very, very common process that happens, and a lot of times we'll use the term lifestyle drift. And what that means, and this is true for anyone, when you're making X amount of dollars, typically a smaller amount, you're much more frugal. You try to become much more efficient with how you spend. And as your income grows, then typically, what would you think? Your lifestyle grows. And so instead of being concerned about when I go out to eat or when I need to buy something, I'm looking at those dollars. You just sort of absorb it, and it becomes part of your natural spending habits. And again, that's only natural as your income grows. And so keeping up with the Joneses sort of falls into that, in that, in our area of the world, especially on the coast, boats are a big thing, and it becomes, whose boat's bigger than the next one. And so I think a lot of what we go back to in my previous comment was I'm talking to them about, hey, let's do the things that you need to do. Let's do the core things in order to meet the goals that you need to meet. And then if you want to get the boat or you want to get the third car. You want to get the second home you can, of course, within reason, but it allows you to sort of have the best of both worlds. So, but it's a constant conversation. And, certainly I'll have times that I'm wondering why they did what they did. But a lot of times I simply say, look, my goal is not to tell you what you can and can't purchase or what you can and can't buy. My goal is to tell you, if you want these things to happen, then it's possible these other things can't happen. So, like any scenario, there's a give and take. And so, but it is very difficult for certain clients to understand they do not have to keep up with the Joneses, just work within their lifestyle, their budget, their family needs.
Gotcha. Okay. What about debt in general? Ignoring minimums, out of sight, out of mind, even when it comes to things like auto pay. Help us understand and have a productive conversation about debt specifically.
Well, debt can be good debt and bad debt, as I say a lot. And what I mean by that is obviously, and this may not be news to anyone, but first start with autos. Again, within reason, a reasonable vehicle, and I'm not saying you out and get a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, but with a reasonable cost vehicle, which is obviously a lot more expensive than it once was, in my mind, autos are sort of necessary evils. You have to have one. You have to drive it. You want something reliable. You want something comfortable. Want something that can take your family where you need to go place to place. So that debt, while not ideal, to me is a necessary debt. And if you do it in a smart way, and again, if you have good credit, then it's not going to be that bad from an interest rate or a long-term standpoint. It's going to be a 3, 4, 5-year commitment. So to me, that's, as I mentioned, sort of necessary debt. Then you get into credit card debt, which is obviously not good debt, and Americans in general have an issue with credit card debt, and that's because the rates are so incredibly high. And I have several clients who put everything they have on a credit card, but they have the discipline to pay it off on a monthly basis. And so, with credit card debt, that's one of the more difficult ones because it just keeps compounding because you don't see it every month. And so you just keep spending because there's no money coming out. And that's why, people like Susie Orman and the others have, made a great living by really promoting to eliminate debt. And while I do agree with some of their principles, that doesn't suit everyone. And it also depends on where you are from an income standpoint. And debt can also help you utilize leverage and other things along those lines. So credit card debt, obviously bad. Housing investment debt, I think, again, done in the right setting, in fitting in with your financial situation, can be very good. A lot of people just hate debt by nature, want to pay their houses off very quickly, want to pay everything off. I'm a little more of keeping that, house debt long term, because typically you can get a low rate. You can always pay it off in the future, and you don't want to sacrifice short-term needs or savings needs that you have in order just to eliminate a debt. And again, some people are very focused on paying that off as quickly as they can. Some people are more open to, understanding how that fits into their entire situation. So those, to me, are the main 3 debts that we end up talking about mostly with people.
I was talking about the credit card, kind of just minimum payments or set it and forget it. How about setting and forgetting a financial plan? Like, you meet with a financial services professional, you create a financial plan, and you just kind of let it sit there. You don't really pay attention to your investments. You throw away the prospectuses. You don't really open the mail when it comes to, listening to your financial advisor or all of the pieces of paper that come from the broker dealer. What about that? What about a set it and forget it financial plan?
Well, I think, you mentioned prospectuses, and you probably should throw those in the trash, Matt. I mean, unless you need help sleeping at night. I'm joking. Compliance will get me on that, but it's like anything. You can't just start it and never think about it again. Again, if you have a very good financial advisor, I'm sure they're going to put you on a good track to begin with. But as we say, life changes, things change. You get married, you get divorced, you have children, you change homes, you change jobs, you change vehicles. So all of that changes on a year-to-year basis, and that's why we really focus, on our financial plan renewals each year with our clients. We're probably at about an 85% renewal rate, which is very, very high in the industry, but that's because we believe in this proactive process of continuing to monitor and look at your financial plans. So a lot of people do prefer just to put their head in the sand and hope it'll work out one day. But again, you've heard this one 100 times, but people spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their retirement. And so I think that's the key, is you got to take time to look at it on an ongoing basis because of what I mentioned. So many things change over time, and it's not always going to be the exact same every year. And you want to make sure you deal with it today instead of 10, 12, 15 years down the road, because by then it's too late.
Now, what about not having a plan? I know you are very, very partial to financial planning, but let's just talk about not having any sort of plan for retirement. Is there any way that we can get around that a little bit, or what?
Certainly there are tools with the internet these days where you can find some very basic information on, how you should save, what should you be saving, where you can get insurances, things along those lines. I think as your life gets more complex, your income goes up, you start to have a family, then you really need to work with some sort of advisor to really help you sort through it. And as I say to a lot of my clients, I'm a disinterested third party. And it doesn't mean I don't have interest in you, but it simply means that I don't have an emotional attachment to the conversation. My viewpoint is I want to make sure you're successful. I want to make sure you're doing what you need to do financially. I want to make sure your family is covered, that you're doing all the things that you need to do. And so, can you do some of those basics initially on your own? Absolutely. You need to save money for retirement, save in your retirement plan. You typically know you need some level of life insurance, but a lot of times people can't quantify what those numbers need to be. And so you end up with a situation where they're either severely uninsured, they're saving way less than they need to be saving, they don't know the best avenues, what to take advantage of in order to work in their individual situation. So to answer your question, I think you can do a bit of both, but once things get a little more complex, you really need the services of somebody who really understands how to look at everything in your holistic picture.
And that's going to lead us to the next one, which is a really bad financial habit, which is getting caught up in the emotions of the stock market. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. We have this conversation, not as much as you would think, because I like to believe that we do a good job of explaining to our clients how investing is going to affect you, over the short term, long term. You're going to have the ups and downs. And I think we do a good job of letting them be aware of that. But that's a big item that we really, really are looking at. So, yes, we absolutely get that conversation quite a bit with individuals reacting to the market. Again, I think we don't get it as much as a lot of it other advisors may, or I like to believe that, because I think we do a good job on really focusing on helping them understand that there's going to be ups and downs, how it fits into their overall situation. And so it is a big hurdle, though, to get people to understand that a lot of these short-term swings or the noises in the market really don't affect their long-term goals. And so if you keep the long-term in mind, then you're going to be in a good situation. So when I have a 35-year-old concerned about their 401k money, certainly don't want to dismiss it, because it is money. It does move. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially because the market is very difficult to understand. But we also want them to keep in perspective that you can't touch this money until 59 and a half at minimum. So you've got, 20, 25, 30 years until you're going to utilize this money. And so we help bring that conversation back to center on why they did the things they're doing originally. And again, short-term money's different. That has different conversations around it. Of course, I just mentioned long-term money. So it's, again, I hate to keep coming back to it, Matt, but it all depends on your individual situation. And that's why it's so important to be specific and not just assume, oh, it's great for everybody to save X percent, because that may not fit your situation, or you need X dollars of insurance. Again, that may not fit your situation depending on what kind of family situation you have, what kind of legacy you may receive from other family members. There's just a lot of different things that can impact it.
What about refusing to talk about money? Now, we could probably do an entire podcast about the ramifications of that, but why is it so important to have those conversations, and not just from your spouse, but also to your kids or your parents? Let's chat about that a little bit.
Well, I think it really helps define what you're trying to accomplish. If you have those conversations about money means very different things to everyone, and being rich or wealthy or comfortable has different definitions to everyone. So I think it's key that you're having that conversation with your spouse or significant other, saying, here's what money means to me and here's why I want to discuss it, or versus your spouse or again, your partner, who may have a different thought on how the money affects them. And then I think it's key to make sure, again, especially once you obtain a larger amount of money, that you want to have those conversations when you're with your children when it's appropriate and you feel like they're ready for it, so they understand your wishes and what you want to happen and how you want that money dealt with or looked at. And if you don't tell them, they're not going to know, because you can lay out certain things in your will and certain documents, but I think it's good to have that conversation. They know what's important to you. They know what you want to happen. They also understand how you expect them to use the money, how you expect them to treat it. So I just think it's very important to have those conversations. And why everyone avoids it, I think it's just like a will, or just like a conversation around death. It's just uncomfortable. People like to keep that to themselves, and they just simply don't want to have that conversation to get into those details, because it puts them in an uncomfortable situation.
My last question, or my last bad financial habit, is something you and I have talked about before, but I think it's important to repeat, which is not taking advantage of a match of your 401k at work.
You're saying
that's a bad habit, right?
Advantage?
Yeah. How it is a bad habit not to take advantage of a work 401k match.
Absolutely. I mean, we do a lot with retirement plans. I've enrolled a lot of individuals in retirement plans, and that's one of the very first conversations that we have is, and I try to break it down simply to say, if you put $10 on the table and I gave you $15 back with no repercussions except you were giving me that money, would you take it? And everybody says, absolutely. And in essence, that's what your match is doing in a retirement plan. You're getting, quote unquote, free money just to participate in the retirement plan. And that's before you have any investment returns or any conversations around that. You're simply saying, if you're willing to put in X dollars, you're going to get X in match. And a common match is, 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%. You'll see a lot of companies that have that matching, and some are much better and some are less than that. But it's one of those things that, the term no-brainer is overused, but that's certainly where it clicks in my mind, is to say, if there's something I can make a 50% return on for simply participating in it, why wouldn't I do that, right? I mean, it's just one of those things that should be your baseline starting point when you're saving, and then you want to go up from there, but you absolutely want to take advantage of that free money that's available or that matching contribution.
Anything I should have talked about that is a bad financial habit that you've come across that we should wrap up today's podcast with?
I think this would fall into it, Matt. It's really about consistency. So we have that conversation a lot that, the best example, working out or losing weight. You can't do it for 1 week and expect you're going to lose the weight that you wanted to over that time period, or you're going to make the muscle gains that you wanted to over that time period. It's the same with financial habits. You have to do them consistently over a long term to really impact your situation. And so they say that it takes 21 days to form a habit. So that's where I always tell everyone to start. Go 3 weeks, see if you can continue to do this habit. And it can be simple things like we're not going to eat out as much, or we're going to make sure we put away more dollars into certain accounts or savings or investments or whatever it may be. But I think that's one of the big themes that we also discuss is you've got to have that financial consistency to reach the long term. This is not a short term game. It's very much a marathon, as they say, and you've got to consistently stay on target and hit your goals in order to reap the benefits long term.
If somebody's listening to this podcast, Carl, and they realize that they've fallen into some of these bad habits, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can certainly start by going to our website, which is Jacobs and spelled out Coolidge.com, or they can reach us at our office number, 912-265-2876. And myself, Russell, and our team would be happy to speak with anyone and help them really get a grasp of what they're doing with their financial situation and hopefully how we can help them make it better.
That's fantastic. Well, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. That way, every time they come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And if you know somebody who's falling into these bad financial habits, just share this podcast with them by clicking that share button below. So for everybody at Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Russell C. Jacobs III, Carl B. Coolidge, James Jacobs, and William Schwartz are registered representatives of and offer securities, investment advisory, and financial planning services through MML Investor Services, LLC, member SIPC, Supervisory Office, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacobs, Coolidge & Company, LLC is not a subsidiary or affiliate of MML Investor Services, LLC, or its affiliated companies.